This is the Hype Squad with Charli McConnell, a podcast where women can be full of themselves and brag about what they're good at. Each week, we're going to bring you conversations covering topics like motherhood, life, relationships, business, and everything in between, because anything is possible with your very own Hype Squad. What's up, ladies? Welcome back to the Hype Squad. I'm Charli McConnell, your host, and today we're welcoming Stefanie Adler. She is a certified nutrition consultant, a functional diagnostic nutritionist, and a women's hormone and fertility expert. Stefanie is also the host of the Wisdom of the Womb podcast and has been featured in publications like the New York Post for her science-backed nutrition advice. As a passionate advocate for women's health and wellness, Stefanie is not afraid to go against the grain and challenge mainstream beliefs about what's possible for her clients. Her mission is simple yet powerful: to inspire women to work with their bodies, to unlock their innate wisdom, heal naturally, and break away from the limiting narratives of conventional medicine. Girl, sign me up. Stefanie, welcome to the Hype Squad.
Hey, Charlie, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to talk all things like women health. I always say like I'll get us on a soapbox about it. But tell me, let's just start from like the get-go. Tell me a little bit about your private practice, the type of woman that you're supporting and what services you offer. Let's
Yeah.
start there.
So big question because
Yeah.
at the root of it, it's really I help women thrive in the modern world. And there are unfortunately so many blocks when it comes to our physiological body that are surrounding us in this modern world and that our authority, like the people that we go to and give authority to for medical help are missing. And
Hmm.
so, what I do is I help women uncover their hidden blocks to wellness, utilizing functional lab testing and utilizing ancient, not ancient, but like ancestral and traditional nutrition practices
I love
to
that.
help the body come back to balance and heal itself. So, it's really empowering women to be their own self-healers. And yes, I'm a witness and a guide on that journey, but my goal and what ends up happening with my clients is they leave feeling like they are the experts of their body.
Mm. I love that. I relate to that a lot because what I say in my own coaching practice is the goal is for you not to need me anymore, and that I think that's the nurse in me. And just because nursing is at the core, it is advocating, teaching, letting the patient know themselves better, right? And you shouldn't need me forever, right? That should never be the case. Like I should be able to give you the tools to do this for yourself. So I love that. And thank you for giving me like a broad overarching, what you work on. And there's so much good stuff there. And there's a couple of things Stephanie and I chatted a little bit before we started recording. And I'm like, there's so much I want to talk about. I have to kind of like streamline it. So one of the things that we talked about was obviously at the menstrual cycle. That's a huge thing for women. It is like the fifth vital sign. I truly believe that. And one of the things specifically was like cycle syncing and how you can kind of line up productivity and inspiration, all those things with your cycle. So talk to like let's just start there because I think we could spend a lot of time here.
Totally could. I mean, we could go on like a full workshops here. And to set the stage, I do feel like it's helpful for people because sometimes people who are listening to this are like, what do you mean different phases of my cycle or different parts of my cycle? I have like when I'm on my period and when I'm not, right? And so really like let's just back up 1 second, break down the 4 different phases of the menstrual cycle. So everyone's like, oh, okay, I get it. And maybe I can kind of see where I'm going through that. And then we can start to plug how do you utilize these different seasons of our cycle is the way that I describe it. Because
Mm-hmm.
everything like we have to remember we are part of the natural world, right? And our body is cyclical, just like it is in nature. Nothing can be in summer forever, nothing can be in winter forever. And so what really blows a lot of people's minds is that men cycle on a 24-hour hormone cycle. So like every day feels the same.
I
And
love this.
I'm not like actually an F the patriarchy kind of girl. Like I love men and I think we can have some like really amazing men to love on. So I don't mean this in a bad way, but in a way that's been actually detrimental, I think, to a lot of women's success. Our society has aligned with that 24-hour cycle. But women, we cycle on average on a 28-day cycle. So we don't feel the same every day, and our activity shouldn't be the same every day, and our ambition changes throughout the month. And so it has us kind of feeling like we are starting and stopping or hitting walls as we're trying to actualize our goals and really fulfill our life's purpose in the world, unless we can hack the code. And so this is the code. So there are 4 different seasons of your cycle. If you've read Alyssa Vitti's work, I love her. She's amazing. And I was studying this before I ever heard of her, before her books came out. And so my seasons are a little bit different, and I think they make more sense. So I'm going to share mine. And if this is a little different than what you've learned, that's okay. So the first is like the obvious one, right? Everyone realizes when they have blood coming out of their vagina, right? And so it's like, yay, that's my period. And that's the easiest one to know. But what some things you might not know about your menstrual phase, which is the time that you're bleeding, is that one, your hormone levels are actually the lowest that they are going to be all month. Most people think of themselves as like super hormonal when they're on their period, but the reality is you're actually like the least hormonal that you're going to be all month. And when we have those lowered hormone levels, we actually have a little bit more intuition. The right and left side of our brain have their communication turned up, and we're able to access what I recognize and see in people as that like feminine intuition. And so we can really use this time to connect with like, what is true for me? Where do I want to go with my business, with my life, and my partnership? Like really sitting with yourself and accessing some of that intuition is one of the best things that you can do during your menstrual cycle, or during your menstrual phase of your cycle. Like you have really strong gut instincts. So for example, if you were like making a big investing decision or a big, like making a big decision about where you want to go in your
Sure.
business or in your life, it's a really good time to get a gut check on it. Now, there's a little bit of a caveat here, and a lot of what we're going to be talking today is it's breaking down the difference between common and normal. So
Mm.
it's really common to have painful periods. It's really common to have really bad PMS and some of these symptoms that have us hate on our period, but that's actually not normal. And that's a sign that your body is out of balance and is asking for more support. So if it feels like you're like, there's no way I could make a big gut decision because I'm just like totally not in my body because of cramps or whatever it is, that is a signal like, hey, let's provide a little bit more additional support for your body so that you can hack the code. So if you're
Mhm.
listening to this and like that doesn't feel possible for you yet, just know that it's 100% possible. I have so many women who have completely pain-free periods and who are just totally like in love with their period and in love with their menstrual cycle. And that's possible for you too. Okay, so that's the menstrual phase, and we can afterwards get into like more of the specifics around,
Girl, I'm
team.
making notes. I got all kinds of stuff to come back to. I love it. Keep
Great.
going.
So then we have our follicular phase. And this is the phase that is from the time that you finish bleeding till the time that you get ready to ovulate. It's typically like some ways that you might start to notice that you're in this phase are you're starting to feel a little bit more energetic. You're starting to feel a little bit more like, okay, I could be social. So what's happening is that estrogen is slowly on the rise during this phase. It's called the follicular phase because your body is making FSH, follicular stimulating hormone. Basically, our bodies are so primal. Like we've come to the, 2025, but our bodies are stuck back in like way back when, caveman days. And so our bodies are just super primal, and this whole process is about reproduction. And so the little follicles are all, I almost imagine them like almost like little like minions, if you've ever seen that movie,
Yeah.
like, kind of bouncing around, being like, oh, which one of us is going to get picked this month? And let's all start to mature.
Uh-huh.
So they're all just kind of starting to get stimulated and like, oh, okay, this is exciting. We're going to have another chance to get picked to be the egg this month. And so all of those follicles are getting stimulated. And now I like to think of estrogen as your fun Aunt Estrogen. Okay. She comes to town. She's got like a hot cheetah, jacket on. She's wearing some fun, fun heels. And she's like, do you have a fake ID? Do you want to go dancing? Should we go out? Let's get our nails done. She's like, I want to be your wing woman. I'm going to just like be fun and flirty. And so she is on the rise during this part of your cycle. And so you're starting to feel a little bit more like, I'm going to do the things, but she's not at her peak yet. And this gives you an opportunity to be a little bit more focused because once she's like fully in town, you're just all you want to do is party. This is like the planning for it, right? So you actually have you have a lot of creativity right now. You should be asking really good questions, and like this is a really great time for brainstorming and just like getting really clear. So if you got really clear on what you wanted in your menstrual cycle or during your menstruation phase, then in this follicular phase, you're more kind of like, okay, now like what am I going to do to make it happen? And like planning that out, making the connections, things like that. So you're really good at strategizing, problem solving, creativity. It's almost like the masculine side of feminine energy, where it's like really focused and really like, has the bumpers on, and it allows you to like flow.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have ovulation. And if you are looking to take your life into technicolor, like from black and white into technicolor, figuring out when you're ovulating is going to be one of the best launch pads for that.
Mm-hmm.
So they've done studies on actually on strippers, which is a funny way of them doing this. But what they found is that strippers who were on hormonal birth control were making less money than the strippers who were not. And they figured out that it was because when the women who were not on hormonal birth control were ovulating, the pheromones that they were putting out made them so magnetic and so attractive that they were making almost double the amount of tips as the other women. Now, we can translate this to anything in our life. Getting a promotion, having the hard conversation, going on a special date, doing a presentation for work, whatever it is, you are more magnetic. Your communication skills are on point. You are so articulate. It's the time to like book the big podcast interview. You're also very optimistic, very confident. Even your face is changing. So your face becomes a bit more symmetrical during ovulation. Your cheeks get a little rosy tint. And what's happening hormonally is that estrogen, that fun aunt estrogen, is like peaked. Okay. And so you are just like, life of the party. I want to be front and center. This is like your most confident time, but you're also getting a little surge of testosterone.
Mm.
Again, super primal. Our bodies are wise. So we're getting that little surge of testosterone to make us feel a bit more horny so that we could reproduce, because this is our
Mm-hmm.
fertile window. So it's really an amazing opportunity to harness this energy. This phase gives us about 5 or 6 days of this really potent, powerful energy. And if you can hack that, and the term cycle syncing, I actually don't use so much in my practice because I feel like it implies that like everything has to be synced up perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a program called Cycle Informed Coaching where I train coaches in this practice of cycle informing, because if you're a fitness coach or if you're a life coach or if you're a sex coach, whatever it is, all of this is relevant.
Mm-hmm.
But it's called cycle informed coaching. So how do we use our cycle to inform decisions we're making? How do we use it to inform everything from potentially the way we eat, the way we're working out, or the way that we're engaging, in our love life with our children, whatever it is. So if you can figure out when you're ovulating and use that to inform as much of these outward opportunities, you will find everything in your life flows so much easier.
Mm.
And then we move into the luteal phase,
The
which I
bummer.
well, so yes, but Charlie, that's the thing. We have to break the
No,
we
but
have to like
I know. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that.
this is
But yeah,
well, you're not wrong. Everyone has like a negative connotation with the luteal phase. I feel so bad for the luteal phase. She's like
she gets a
like the
bad rap. She does.
she's like the one no one wants to invite to the party. But you know what? Your luteal phase is 2 weeks long. That's half of the month. That's half of your
Mm-hmm.
cycle. And so I am so, so passionate about helping women, one, balance their hormones so that this phase is not a bummer. And two, understanding the energetics of it so that we can utilize this time really well.
Mm.
So if the first part of your cycle is more dominated by your fun aunt estrogen, this is grandma progesterone. Okay.
Mm.
And
Love
now
that.
when your grandma and I had I had grandmas who were not exactly like this. So this is, I feel like I resonate with the
Yeah.
people who are like oh, I hate the luteal phase because like my grandmas were not this. But the way I envision it is like when you have the grandma who comes over and like rubs your back before you go to bed and is like, oh my gosh, honey, like I'm just so happy to spend time with you and let's be cozy at the house together and let's bake cookies and let's do all these things. And if you're going to go out, please just don't stay out too late and talk to strangers. Like, so the progesterone is the progestation hormone. And
Mm.
so what's happening is your body doesn't actually know if it's pregnant or not yet. It's pretending for 2 weeks if it's not
Mm-hmm.
pregnant. And if it is, it's just getting ready. So your grandma, just like she should, to protect you or to protect her future grandchild or great
Mm-hmm.
grandchild, is kind of a little skeptical of people, of things, of new activities. She's more like, I don't know about that. Like maybe, right? And so you have a little bit more of this like discerning eye, which can actually be used really well, especially in business or dating, whatever these things
Sure.
are. So if like you're wearing these rose-colored glasses during your ovulation phase, you kind of have these like more like they're not blue tinted glasses, but just like a little bit more like, okay, like let me see what I maybe missed when I was just on cloud nine.
Mm.
So it's a really cool opportunity to come in and like, for example, if you were in a hiring cycle, this is like when you would have the second interview with someone of like, oh, okay, so like, let me see how I actually feel about the person, or like, what are some of the red flags I might have missed before? Same with dating. Um, it's a really good time to like review or do like any sort of back end type of thing in your business, like organizing. I don't know if anyone's ever had this experience, but most women I talk to who are listening, but most women I talk to are like, oh yeah, I know that feeling where your like closet is a mess for like 2.5 weeks and it's just like a total disaster. And then one day you look at it and you're like, I can't do anything until this closet is clean.
Mm-hmm.
That's like your luteal phase energy where like you're nesting, like you almost want just like everything needs to be in order, you want to organize everything. So it can be the same in your business, right, or in your schoolwork or whatever it is. It's like, how do we on the back end come in and organize everything, review analytics, edit things, like have use that more discerning eye for good. And then I will say the luteal phase, even though it's about 2 weeks long, so a healthy luteal phase should be about 12 to 14 days, it's kind of broken up energetically a little bit into two parts. So there's like part one of your luteal phase and part two. And so in the first half, you have that critical mind that kind of comes in. And then in the second half, you're a little bit, sometimes even more apathetic. And this is like just an opportunity to really ask to slow down because again, we're getting ready to bleed. And so if we think about it seasonally, okay, then
Mm-hmm.
this just like helps people track it. We've had menstruation, which I think of as like fall, the shedding of the lining, right? Thinking about the shedding of the trees and the leaves on the trees. And it's like sweater season. You're like starting to go inside more, starting to just like get all those like, ooh, okay, feels, right? That
Mm-hmm.
intuitive, time. Then we have winter, which like if things are not dead in winter. They're just
Mm-hmm.
like getting ready to bloom. It's like the planning, the getting ready for the big season. And then we have ovulation, which is spring. And what
Mm-hmm.
happens in ovulation? The flowers bloom and they're ready to be fertilized, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're fertile. And this is like the opportunity when everything's blossoming, spring flings. Think about it like that. And
Mm-hmm.
then we move into luteal phase and it's summer, but I think of it as like kind of like that summer that your grandma came to town, it's like kind of a sticky, muggy summer. Your grandma came to town. We spend a lot of time, doing projects inside together. We really, like we're taking care of our house and like taking care of our things before we got ready to bleed again. So that was a long explanation, but it's kind of giving you the outline of how do we make this work for us?
Stephanie, I love that so much. I took so many notes. I mean, obviously, my background is in nursing and labor and delivery, so I know the cycle. But I love the way you simplified it, and it's interesting your seasons because I typically am like winter is bleeding, and then I go on from there from like spring, summer, and like summer is like ovulation and like sun's out, guns out type of thing. And then kind of fall is the prepping. So I thought that was a really cool change of perspective. I loved that. And there's so many things I want to come back to. I love the way you made it like the fun and estrogen and then the grandma progesterone. I love that. Um, okay, the stripper study got me. I love that share, and you're gonna have to send me that study because I'm super interested to read more about that. But to give you a little bit of background for me as far as like my own journey with my cycle, because I think this will kind of feed into the conversation. So I was on birth control. I mean, I know you've heard this story a million times because this is most women's story. And I actually saw on your Instagram like one of the memes was I was like, she's talking to me about I came off birth control and now I'm ready to get pregnant right away. Why is it not working? I mean, I was on birth control for 10 to 12 years. I didn't start it in high school or even college. It wasn't until like maybe 21 or 22. So just under 10 years that I was on birth control. And when I came off, I'm thinking, I mean, I'm going to get pregnant on birth control. Let's be real. I mean, that's everyone's fear. Like I didn't take my pill at the same time. Something's going to happen. But then when you're ready, it's like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And then, ensues a long, hopefully not terribly long journey of fertility and getting pregnant and all of these things. And that's such a, relatable season for most women. Like if people get pregnant by surprise, good for you. I love that for them, but that's not most people's story. And when I came off birth control and then I had my daughter, I was like, I'm not going back on birth control. Like, no way. It took me so long to get this like sorted out. There's no way. Like, so what do I do? So I started doing like the temperature checking in the morning. And to be perfectly honest, like that just wasn't sustainable for me. So I ended up getting the Aura ring. And I swear, I joke all the time. I have it on right now. I will die in this ring. I love this ring so much because, and all I use it for is to track my period because it is your temperature. And so it's really interesting because I can see the fluctuations in my temperature and then I can correlate to how I'm feeling. And I remember like when I started this whole anti-birth control mindset, there were so many things, and the stripper conversation is what really reminded me of the pheromones of you could potentially choose a different partner than you maybe. And I know some people are like, oh, wah wah, like that's crazy, but I do believe that the pheromones are real. And I immediately was like, well, I met my husband before I started birth control, so we're good, we're good, we're good. Nothing's going to change when I come off of it. But I now that I've been off of it for years at this point, years and years, I can't imagine going back on. And one of the things I've noticed too, and I'm curious as like what your perspective is, I work with a lot of college girls and a lot of them have IUDs, which back in the day, you couldn't get an IUD unless you'd had a baby, like your cervix wasn't softened. It's very painful for these girls who have not had children yet to get these IUDs. And there's a whole host of other things coming from that. And I feel like that's kind of a crazy evolution of birth control in general. So what's been your experience with that or in your coaching practice either?
Yeah. I mean, one, I just want to have like a lot of space and compassion for a lot of women who feel like like they don't know what other options are available to them other
Mm-hmm.
than hormonal birth control. And I get it. I was on birth control for 10 years. I did it from the time I was 12, which is like crazy thinking about how
Mm.
GYN put me on birth control pills when I was 12 years old because I'd had two really painful periods. And they were like, well, you could have endometriosis. Here, take this pill. And my mom was just like, well, as the doctor says so, okay,
Mm-hmm.
until I was 21, 22. Yeah, I guess 21. And I mean, it shook me coming
Mm.
off of that medication. Post-birth control syndrome was real for me. This was partially what sparked my obsession with learning about everything about the female body and supporting it. It took me, almost 6 months to a year to have like a regular period back, doing all the things. I mean, it was a lot. And the more we dive into the research, I mean, the more I just wish more women were informed. I'm not anti-birth control, actually. I'm pro informed consent. And I just
Mm-hmm.
think that people don't realize we have no long-term studies, none about this medication. So all of us that have been on this pill for 10 years or on an IUD for 5 years, whatever it is, there are almost no studies past 6 months of what this is doing. I mean,
Really?
it is like the biggest experiment on humankind that we are doing right now in live, and everyone doesn't know that they're a subject. Like it's really wild. And so I saw this a long time ago, a couple years ago, but this woman made like a dress out of the insert that comes with the pill, like the little packet,
Yeah.
made a dress out of it. That's how long it is, of like how many risks that no one's telling you, and who's going and reading that thing. I mean, everything from like risks of diabetes once you get into menopause, risks of IBS or IBD conditions like Crohn's or colitis go up significantly. And no one's asking, hey, do you have any family history of this? I can't tell you how many young women I see in my practice who the story goes like this. Yeah, I went on birth control probably around like 15, and then I went on anxiety medication or depression medication around 16.
Mm,
Talking about that connection, which there's such a strong correlation there. We see it in the data. So my experience with this in my practice is a lot of women either one don't know the way that these hormones are impacting them. And with the IUDs, it drives me bananas because they're all told it's localized.
mm-hmm.
It's only here. And then I tell them this story to explain that nothing in the body is localized. And I hope that
Mm-hmm.
you remember this the next time someone tries to tell you that something is localized in the body. When I was in college, I had a yeast infection and I was like, 3 in the morning online, like so itchy, so miserable. I also lived abroad. And so it wasn't like there were like 24-hour places that I could go and just like get a suppository. And I'm like looking up, and I'm also a really natural person. So I didn't really want to take something to begin with. So I'm like looking up, what do you do if you have a yeast infection? They're like, put yogurt inside your vagina. I did that. And then they're like, put garlic inside your
Uh-huh.
vagina. So again, 3 a.m. craze. I'm like, great, go to the kitchen, peel a clove of garlic, put it up there. I didn't read the part where it said tie a piece of floss around it so you're able to get it out.
Oh.
So 2 days goes by and I can't get this thing out. It's like I'm fishing for it and it's not there.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not kidding, Charlie, when I tell you I'm taking the bus from Tel Aviv to Herzliya, and people next to me are
Yeah.
like I could smell the garlic seeping out of my pores. I'm like an anti-vampire force field around me. I'm like reeking of garlic. I get into class and I'm like, my friends are like, what's that smell? Like everyone is like noticing this. I finally go to the bathroom, I squat, I'm able to get it out. But within 2 days, every single pore in my body
Mm-hmm.
was reeking of garlic from a tiny little garlic clove that was next to my cervix, right? So when we say that something in the body is localized, when you say that, oh, we're just putting a little bit of hormones, but it's just here, it's not going to affect you any other way. It's like, do you not have an understanding of the human body? Every single system is connected. And I actually don't really fault them that much in terms of the medical community, because the way that they've been taught to think about medicine is that everything is separate. You go to a neurologist for something with your brain, you go to a cardiologist for something with your heart, you go to an endocrinologist for your hormones. They're all missing the point that the body is one system and everything connects. So my experience with IUDs is that these women or just hormonal birth control in general, is that these women don't have a real understanding of the way that it's impacting them a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's only once they're able to go off and really own their power and their feminine that they're like, whoa, now I see how far from myself I was. So there are so many ways to protect yourself from unwanted pregnancies, tracking your temperature,
Mm-hmm.
so many others. I mean, people forget, like, when used properly, condoms are 93% effective. People forget about diaphragms. That's what if you watch old episodes of Sex in the City, they're all talking about
Mm-hmm.
their diaphragms. It's like a forgotten art, but I mean, there are so many ways you're only fertile a few days in the month. So like why impact your whole
Yeah.
being all month for that?
I think too, like the sex education or well, yes, body education in general, especially for women, but sex education to talk about contraceptive, like condoms, how they, because a lot of the girls I work with, because they have IUDs, they don't use condoms because to them, getting pregnant is the worst thing that happens. And I'm going to give a shout out to my mom, Betty. I hope you hear this. Like, I have to give her huge props because as a kid, it was really annoying, but I couldn't even use tampons. Like, I had to sneak tampons. I had to go buy them myself, couldn't tell her. She was adamant that nobody went on birth control. Like, none of my sisters, I don't think, and I have three sisters. None of them did birth control. And I think for them, it was more of one of the biggest side effects is gaining weight. And that was definitely the time that we were growing up was like everything was so weight conscious. And it still maybe to this day. But I didn't get on birth control until I was out of the house and I went to like a public clinic of some sort. I was a waitress. And so all I had to do was show that I make $3 an hour and they gave me free birth control. And and that was the end of the story. But my mom was never on board with it. She never wanted me to do it. Even though I had cramps and all of this stuff, she would give me all these heating pads and her message to me always was, and now this is severe, but she was like, getting pregnant is the least of your worries. You could get AIDS and die if you don't use condoms. And so that's I mean, it was scare
Yeah.
tactic, but still, I'm like, okay, pregnant's not the worst thing that could happen, right? And when I came off birth control, and I tell this to anyone who will listen, my brain changed in so many different ways that it was hard to quantify. Even now, like the way I thought about things, the way I handled conversations or conflict, like everything. And I'm like, who is this person? Who is this person? My way of thinking completely changed. And when I dug into it more, I, and there's a ton of like quote unquote conspiracies about birth control that you can dive into and form your own opinions. But for me, I'm like, so you're basically telling me to take this pill that shuts down my body the way it's supposed to work forever. And then I have this pretend period just to kind of mimic that I'm normal and I'm having a period, but that there's no real purpose for it. I'm not even ovulating. And that's the thing too, is like I'll hear people on birth control say I'm ovulating, and I'm like, no, you're not. No, you're not. Do you know how birth control works? Like, that's not real. And, oh, but my period is so light and my cramp. Well, no, because you shut the entire system down. That's why your cramps started. Did you ever like think about? And I remember a woman I worked with when I was really young before I was on birth control. I was having really bad cramps. And I remember her saying, and it was so simple, but no one had ever said it to me. She was like, your uterus is a muscle. And when muscles cramp, you're probably dehydrated. You should drink more water. And I remember thinking like, holy shit. Okay. And I started chugging water and my cramps lessened, like significantly lessened. And I'm like, oh my God, that's like rocket science, right?
Yeah.
So, what do you see? Like, do you see women come to you that are on birth control and you help process them to get off of it? What are like some of the biggest changes you see with those particular clients?
Yeah. One thing I just want to add to this, and I'm so glad that you brought this up, is like, I always talk about a period is a cycle in which ovulation occurs.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a bleed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when they did the initial trials with birth control pills, there was no bleed. There
Yeah.
was just, and women freaked out. They were like, like, what's happening? And that's why they have the placebo pills in there, because it was
Mm,
just like almost to pacify the women taking it and being like, oh, look, everything appears as if this is okay. But
mm,
one thing I will say is sometimes with the IUDs is actually women still are ovulating. And
mm,
not always, but sometimes, because they keep them in for so long. So once they're like usually about halfway through, they'll sometimes start ovulating again. But this is actually even more scary to me because the changes that it's making is it's making changes to the lining of the uterus, and it's making it so thin that a baby wouldn't be able to stick, right? The embryo wouldn't
mm-hmm.
be able to like stick. And what's so upsetting to me about that is I see so many women who years later, after getting off of it, are struggling with implantation when it comes to fertility because that
Mm,
hasn't come back. Again, biggest experiment that like has ever been done on women without our consent, without knowing
mm-hmm.
that we're really a part of this big experiment. So you might actually be ovulating if you're on an IUD and it's like later in your time with it, but that actually might still be something that you need to be really conscious about for down the line. So yes, I have women who come to me who are on birth control for a variety of reasons. I mean, I just started working with a woman now who's was put on birth control because she was recently not formally diagnosed, but suspected to have endometriosis or adenomyosis. And that's the current medical system's treatment for it. But what people don't realize is it's a band-aid. It's a band-aid solution. And when you pull that band-aid off, if you haven't addressed the wound underneath, it's just like a festering infection that has just gotten worse. So, what I help women do when we do that is we look for the root cause of why the thing is happening in the first place. So, if you have really heavy bleeding, if you have really painful periods, if you have terrible acne, whatever the thing is, because most women are actually not exclusively on birth control for pregnancy protection. I
Mm-hmm.
can't remember the exact statistic, but it's something like over 65% of women are on birth control for a reason that is secondary to pregnancy prevention because of, painful periods, whatever we just named. So yeah, I definitely see that all the time. And I'm really helping those women get off of birth control in a way that is more, that enables their body to be more successful with the turning back on of their own hormones.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that through detoxing. We do that through really supporting the system. So people also, some of the side effects that people don't realize with birth control, it impairs nutrient absorption. It causes gut health issues. And then when you have, say pooping problems become period problems. So then you have digestive issues that are caused by the birth control, which will then cause more hormone issues down the line. Sometimes people have PCOS. I mean, it really just, there's so many things. And so we're really, no matter what the thing is, we're looking for the root cause of why it was happening in the first place. And by addressing that, we're able to circumvent the initial symptom that caused people to get on birth control. And if it was purely for pregnancy prevention, I mean, one of the things that we're really doing is teaching fertility awareness method, teaching you to get in touch with your body, teaching you to understand how to, and this is not the rhythm method, it's very different. Fertility awareness, it's looking at things like your cervical fluid and your cervix. And the thing that I love about this method is it's like a light switch. You don't want to get pregnant, you keep it off. You want to get pregnant, you turn it on. It's the exact same practice. You just use it for different things.
Mm.
So it's really so supportive for women who are, it doesn't matter if you're 18 or if you're 28, learning this, it's going to pay off for you later in life.
Yeah, I think, you talking about gut health. When I when I started tracking my period on my Aura ring and noticing like the how irregular it was at first and like really paying attention to why is it so irregular and then getting it down to like an average of 20, not everyone's 28 days, but like an average of 28 to 30 days. And then 1 month, it was pretty early on in me learning how to count macros and very much like food related changes happening. And my period stretched out like 35 days. And I thought, this is so crazy. I haven't done anything different. I had cut down my fat intake significantly. And so I started reading into it because I love this stuff. And the next month I increased because that was so quickly, changeable with macros. I increased my fat intake and my period went right back to normal. And so the correlation of fat and how much you need it in your body, especially women, and how that plays into your period, and how you'll see these bodybuilders who are super, super lean lose their period because the nutrition's not on point. It's just, there's so much there. And obviously, this is not a dig to birth control. Do you, yes, like what you're saying, educate yourself on what is happening and if it's worth it, because it does. It's such a quick fix, right? It is the quickest, easiest thing for you to just make everything go back to the easy way, right? Whether it's cramps or um mood swings or acne, whatever it may be. Because yeah, most people, it's not even about getting pregnant. It's all the other things that they're like, this sucks, I don't want to do this. It is harder to get to the root cause. It does take more patience. It does take diligence in changing your diet, but it, at least in my experience, really, really pays off, regardless of where you are in your fertility and planning for children or anything like that. Oh man, I could talk about this forever. I love this. What's your opinion, just to kind of switch gears for a second, about testosterone therapy? Because I know that is a super common thing right now with women of all ages, of kind of replacing testosterone in their bodies. Do you have any opinions or notions about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple. My biggest opinion about it is we're asking the wrong question. Like, we're not asking, why are we
Mm,
suffering so much hormonally? I mean, even just like, I'll switch gears for 1 second to men. The average, like, and this is what is so problematic about conventional, and I actually even hate the language of conventional, because like like when I say conventional medicine, it's like that's actually only been the conventional medicine for the last like 100 years. Everything that I do has actually been the convention for thousands of
right.
years beforehand, aside from the functional lab tests. But anyways, I digress. So when you go to a conventional doctor and you get a hormone panel done, first of all, their range of normal is dependent on what 85% of the people who come in and take that test within. It doesn't
Mhm.
actually have a meaningful, like, this is what's healthy and this is what's not. So there's always like that normal range, and it's humongous and it makes no sense. And if you're one tiny point inside of it, the doctor's like, oh, everything's fine. And then
Mm.
there's a functional range, which is like, where is my body optimally functioning? And one thing that we are seeing is that because our population is changing in response to our environment and our modern day stressors, that what we consider a normal testosterone level in a man today was what an 80-plus-year-old man would have had 50 years ago.
Wow.
So like if your husband goes to the doctor and gets his testosterone checked and it's like, well, everything looks fine, but I don't feel like I'm putting on muscle the way I should, or I'm not as horny, or my energy's low, or I'm losing hair, whatever it is, we should, that range of normal is like so far gone and so skewed. And so the bigger question for me is like asking why. I mean, this is going back also to the so there's this researcher, her name is Dr. Shanna Swan, and she's been looking at phthalates and their impacts on hormones. And they've been doing these studies for over 20 years. And so they've been able to see that exposure to phthalates in utero, so like when you're pregnant and you are exposed to phthalates, your daughter or your son will have the impact of this. And for men, it's causing lower testosterone levels later in life. They're able to do these studies now because these children that were born are now adults. And for women, it's causing higher testosterone levels. So things like that manifests PCOS for women. And this is impacting fertility. But what we're estimated now is that by 2050, so 25 years from now, the median sperm rate, so like if anyone here is a math person, not the mean, but the median. So if we lined 100 people up and said the 50th person in the middle, the median sperm rate would be 0. Like
Wow.
the question we need to be asking is like, why are testosterone levels so impacted? Like what is going on? And so it's not that I have an issue with the replacement therapy. If it's bioidentical, I think it could be really supportive for people because that's what their body is supposed to be creating. And so they're going to
Right.
feel good on it. But we're asking the wrong question. The question needs to be why.
Mm.
Not how do I fix it right away? Yes, I get that you want the result. Okay. But if we don't fix the reason why, then we're just playing a game of whack-a-mole and it's just going to show up as another
Sure.
manifestation of imbalance. And eventually, if you don't deal with what's going on underneath, there's not going to be enough medication in the world to fix whatever the root cause is manifesting as.
So when I hear you say that, I think of like endocrine disruptors. Is that kind of the path we're on as far as what you're saying is just like all the things that we're exposed to that are disrupting our endocrine systems, which is our hormone system, that's affecting that? Is that how I'm hearing this? Okay.
It's
Yeah,
one big part
totally
of
agree.
it. It's not 100% of it, but it is one
Sure.
big part of it. The other part of it, I we could be here all day, me talking about, but essentially what it is we're all unfortunately becoming less resilient. Like the world is becoming more toxic. So there's like the endocrine system, and that's, like how it's being impacted by like the ever-growing toxins in our world. And there's a lot that we can do to make our homes and our bodies a safer space and
Sure.
be really mindful of that, to purchase food that isn't covered in pesticides, which unfortunately even the organics in the grocery store have been compromised. So there's that whole side of it. But the other side of it is that we are inheriting the previous generations, not only their toxic burden, which we are, but we're also inheriting their microbiome and their gut health. And so every generation that we go that has had more and more exposure to antibiotics, we are becoming less and less resilient, which is why you look at children today. The average, the statistic is that 54% of children in the United States today have a chronic health condition.
Mm.
I mean, it's like unbelievable. It's like so upsetting if you really start to get into the details of the numbers. I have a podcast episode if anyone is interested in going deeper about this. It's titled "It's Now or Never for Our Health," because what we're seeing is that the children who are being born in the last 5 years are even less resilient than the children that were born the generation prior. Like, I mean, not even generation, but like the 5 years prior. And so basically, like, if your great grandparents had had maybe one exposure to antibiotics or none, then they passed on this really robust microbiome and this really robust gut, because we inherit this in the womb. We're swallowing amniotic fluid, we're swallowing our microbes. Then if you're born vaginally, we get exposure to it. With the increasing amount of C-sections that we have, we're seeing even more detriment to the microbiome because it's just like whatever's on those people's hands. So
Right.
anyways, your great great grandparents and your grandparents probably had one or two exposures to antibiotics post World War II, right? When they really came on the market. So then their parents are, their kids are my parents, for example,
Mm-hmm.
had maybe 4 or 5 exposures. before I was born. And so then I'm inheriting 7. And then I've had maybe 10 exposures to antibiotics in my life. And so then my son, without doing that really intentional work, and this is something I'm so passionate about, is the preconception and pregnancy and postpartum work, because we're really have the opportunity to pass down generational wellness. And this is something that like every woman should be thinking about. I wish women who were not thinking about getting pregnant were thinking about this, because this is like it really feels to me like we're at a critical point for the sake of humanity, and we have to make a change. And so every time you take an antibiotic, you kill off a community of microbes, which creates an imbalance. And so
Mhm.
essentially we've been passed down these more and more compromised guts and therefore immune systems. And so we're really seeing the toxic burden, but also the less resilient body. So our job is to come and build a more resilient body and reduce our toxic exposure.
Mm, girl, I love that. I've never heard or even considered the the antibiotic exposure of your parents and your grandparents. And I'm sitting here kind of a little bit mind blown at the moment because I'm thinking when I was a kid, I was supposed to get my tonsils out when I was like 3 or 4, when most kids do, and I needed tubes in my ears and all that jazz. And my dad had just died right around that age, and my mom was like, "Hell no, I'm not putting my child to sleep. Like I'm so traumatized." With good reason, right? I probably would have done the exact same thing. And so I spent the next 3 years constantly on antibiotics because I just had ear infection after ear infection. And I can remember, and this is not really off topic, I can remember having like constant yeast infections as a kid and just thinking in my mind, this part of my body was always going to hurt. Like
Mm.
this part of my body was always going to be uncomfortable. It was always going to burn and itch. And I was a kid, right? That was my first depiction of like what that part of my body felt like. And I've done a ton of work to heal that. And I think I've been really successful with that. But going back to the amount of antibiotics, but then I think about my daughter. She's been on one antibiotic her entire life. She's 8. I only breastfed her for like 6 weeks because that's all I could handle. And I see a lot of kids around her. We have other obstacles that we have to overcome. She has epilepsy, so she's on medication for that, which could be something correlated to, and I don't know, I've not dug into all of that. But I am always really hesitant to the one antibiotic she went on. It was almost like I was too naive. Like, even when you have a nursing background or you have a medical background, all that shit goes out the window when it's your own kid for the most part. Like, you really, in my experience, I had to check myself constantly. Like, you know better, take a minute because you just go into like the survival instinct, make my child feel better, make it go away. So I don't fault our parents whatsoever for doing that, but I've had to catch myself of like, no, we're just going to ride this out. I'm going to let her run a fever for a little bit, kill off and it's taken me a while to kind of work my way up to that type of parenthood versus blowing her up with Motrin and Tylenol and keeping it down, realizing like this is her body's way of healing. We don't need an antibiotic. If we do, I'll explore that. But there's just so much there because I see kids all the time, constantly. And I'm a huge proponent of like, if you get an antibiotic, you have to finish it. Do not go halfway. Do not like none of this. But then there's so much stuff that comes from that.
Can
Wow.
I
I have so much to
really
unpack.
quick? Can
Yeah.
I talk something really quick? So, there's a nutritional protocol. It's called GAPS, the Gut and Psychology Syndrome Diet, or the Gut and Physiology Syndrome Diet. And the creator is Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride. She's amazing. And she started her work. She's a medical doctor from Russia who then emigrated after the Soviet Union fell. And her work was in looking at basically how to reverse autism, and ADHD and like other mental disorders, and then it translated to autoimmune disease and things like that. And I actually don't know about epilepsy, but I would be curious if that's part of it. So I'll look into that
Yeah.
later and get back to you. But like when you mentioned the yeast, it's like these things are all connected. And I also don't fault our parents for not knowing these things. And like
Hmm.
knowledge is power. And it is so amazing what we have now. Basically what the antibiotics do is they kill off those microbes, make the ecosystem inhospitable, to the good microbes, and
Mm-hmm.
yeast, which are opportunistic microbes, take over. So, like all of the ear infections were the same symptom of the thing that then eventually caused the yeast infections, and so forth and so on. And so, you were so spot on about that. And the way that I have really started to think about and talk to people about antibiotics is that they are life-saving medications
Mm-hmm.
that should only be used in life-saving circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, like you said, hard in those moments where you're like, she's an ear infection and it really hurts. And it's like in
Mm-hmm.
Europe, they wait 10 days. And if the ear infection hasn't cleared on its own, then maybe they'll offer antibiotics. Here,
Mm.
you go in and day one, that's what they give you. We need to start realizing like that these are amazing life-saving medications, but that should never be used unless it is truly at the point where it could save someone's life. And so I think when you have that perspective shift, it really allows you to be like, oh, okay, now let me think about what else I can do. And if you feel like you don't have the knowledge or education of like, what can I be using that's holistic, right? You know, what can I be putting, like either that's homeopathic or herbal or some of these other things that can really heal. I mean, we forget that there is wisdom that came before antibiotics.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's really empowering. And then just the last thing I'll say about like for anyone listening about, you know, Tylenol or Motrin, like Tylenol, first of all, fevers are a gift to your children and they're a gift to your body. They're burning off everything from like future cancer cells to like the virus itself. I mean, like, please let your kids experience the fever. And even if they have febrile seizures, it's okay. Like, I know that that feels really scary, but again, I encourage people to like reach out to me, send me a message on Instagram if this is resonating with you and you're like, I need to learn more about how to deal with some of these things that come up in childhood or even in adulthood so that I can, you know, better protect myself. I will point you in the direction of amazing books and resources that you can keep on your desk so that if something comes up, you just flip to and you're like, okay, like my daughter has a fever, this is what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are the stewards of our children's health. And it doesn't mean that we have to be perfect. It doesn't, no one's going to be perfect. But what it is we took this responsibility on by having children
Mm.
to respect their bodies and to do the best that we know how. And so I think with the abundance of evidence and resources that we have now, like we owe it to the next generation to really get educated.
Yeah, if only like okay, so my biggest pet peeve with sick kids and yours is too, right? So you're close to experiencing this, but if you ever do like public or traditional school, they want a doctor's note for an excuse. And I'm like, I'm not taking my kid to the doctor to give you an excuse when I'm not. Why? 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 Right? Like, I told you she had a fever, treated at home. She's been fever free for 24 hours, but you have to have that doctor's note to get the excuse. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So
What happens
that's
if you don't have the excuse though?
it, it's an unexcused absence.
But like, are they going to kick her out of school? I'm just curious.
Well,
Like,
depending on what state you live in, if you have so many unexcused absence, you'll have like an officer come to your house. And I mean, yeah, like so because there is, and I want to say, oh gosh, so my husband's business partners are in Amsterdam. And I'm probably going to butcher this story, but if I remember correctly, his business partner had had their kids out of school for an extended amount of time for travel of some sort, or maybe it was someone they knew. I can't remember. But like the cops came to their house, like serving. I don't know exactly what. I don't want to say a warrant because I think that's probably too far fetched. But yeah, I mean, you'll get in a lot of trouble if your kids aren't at school like they're supposed to be. And um, so that's one of my biggest pet peeves. It's like I don't want to have to take her to the doctor. And you know, I do think that tides are changing in some circles pretty quickly. And for me, it's like if you have any sort of exposure on social media to some of these mom bloggers, which is not even a great term to use, but there was this one woman that I started following who was a trauma pediatric nurse, and she would go into depth about the Heimlich maneuver, fever specifically. So, like, how to, and so I'm really interested for you to share your books because we'll put those in the show notes. Because it just, even though I had the medical background, my medical background is in conventional traditional medicine. So it's like when they have a fever, you treat it. And so even that was kind of skewed. But it's like go off of what how they're acting. I do remember my mom saying that to me, like pay more attention to her energy level and the way she's acting. Like just because it's a really high fever doesn't mean it's detrimental, and a low fever could be just as bad. Um, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to like keep my focus because I keep getting all over the place. I'm definitely going to put in the show notes if you share those books. I'll put those in there, or I'll show how to get in touch with you. There was a lot more I wanted to dig into, Stephanie, but I feel like this happened exactly how it was supposed to. So you'll have to come back and talk about all the other goodies we were going to mention. I didn't mention this to you before we started recording. But I always ask everyone to share something from their hype list. The entire, idea behind the hype squad was a place to brag and be full of yourself and teach
Fun.
people your gifts and your lessons and all of those things. So I would love if you're willing to share something that you want to brag or be full of yourself about that we can hype up with you.
Yeah. So here's my brag, and I feel really proud of it. I have a 100% success rate with women who have PCOS, reversing it naturally through diet and lifestyle. And this is with working over 70 plus women who have PCOS. And that's not even including like the hundreds more who just come and have regular cycles. But just for, I think so many women take that as a diagnosis that is like something they live with forever. It is
Mm.
100% reversible with diet and lifestyle. And I have all of my clients have been able to do it.
Wow, that's a huge win. Good for you. That pure gave me chills. Um, Again, I want to dig into that, but I'm like, no, 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 squirrel. I can't. I gotta cut this for time. Thank you so much. I want to celebrate for a second because you were the first guest that I've had on that you came to me, even though it was like your PR group, but you came to me to record this, and it feels very like divine timing and universal that we got to have this conversation and I got to be familiar with your work. And so thank you so much for coming and doing this and getting hyped with us. I am grateful to have had this conversation. Thanks everyone for listening. Be kind to yourselves today and every day, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Charlie.